He's alive! Stay with us, sir. You're safe now.
She locked me in for weeks. Look at him! Our son, what she's done to him!
She must be held legally responsible, no matter what.
We'll investigate thoroughly, sir.
The homeowner, Miss Yvonne Adkins.
She's a total nutcase. There's something seriously wrong with her as she dragged me down, and she'll drag everyone else too.
For over 20 years, Brandon Dawson had been the golden boy. His whole life changed when, at 25, he ignored everyone's warnings and married me, a woman with severe mental issues. I couldn't stand him interacting with anyone else. So I sabotaged his work and ruined his business dinners. When he finally reached his limit and asked for a divorce, I locked him inside the house for a month. At first, he tried to reason with me calmly. In the end, he completely broke down and lashed out. There's something seriously wrong with you, and you're dragging everyone down with you. Yvonne, you're going to die a miserable death. 1 month later, I died unexpectedly in a hidden room in the basement. The police broke the lock and rescued Brandon. Barely conscious, no one knew where I was. His parents, Atticus and Eliana Sawson, were distraught and accused me in front of the officers in tears. Look what that lunatic has done to our only son. She must be held legally responsible, no matter what. Asterisk, the case exploded into national headlines. The Sawson family was one of the country's most prominent pharmaceutical families, and Brandon was the genius everyone placed on a pedestal, reserved by nature. He had an extraordinary talent for drug development, but the same man countless people admired now stood disheveled before a wall of cameras, needing support. He'd never even had so much as a hint of a romantic rumor before. Now his designer shirt was wrinkled, with 2 buttons missing. A dark bruise covered his neck, like a fading hickey. The corner of his lip was split, his face was pale, and his eyes were sunken. I hovered above, watching the camera flashes go off nonstop. Brandon frowned and shot a warning look toward the reporters. But he looked too weak for it to carry any weight. The shutters clicked even faster. Only when officers stretched out the police tape did the media finally back off. Tears streamed down Eliana's face, and Atticus wore a grim expression. An officer asked the homeowner, MS Yvonne Adkins, she's a total nutcase. Brandon cut in, teeth clenched, delivering each word with venom. His eyes were full of hatred. His dry lips split, and a thin line of blood appeared. The officer wrote everything down, then looked up again. Our preliminary check shows you and MS Adkins were legally married for 2 years. A little over a month ago, you filed for divorce. Before the hearing, you voluntarily withdrew the petition. If you believed MS Adkins had serious mental issues, the officer trailed off, but the implication was obvious. If Brandon thought I was unstable, he shouldn't have backed down when he filed for divorce. His flawless face flushed, then drained. Embarrassment and anger mixing together. After a long moment, he spoke through clenched teeth. I must have been blind. I looked at his fingers curled tight with anger. He didn't even have the strength to form a proper fist. Floating in midair, I couldn't help laughing. People always said he was cold and kept everyone at a distance, but I knew his heart could be soft. We had been married for 2 years. My obsessive control had turned his life into chaos. He finally made up his mind and gathered enough evidence to file for divorce. Then, right before the hearing, I shed a couple of tears. I told him I regretted everything and promised I'd change. He kept his face cold and expressionless, but in the end, he withdrew the case. That same night, I locked him in the bedroom after he had eaten the dinner I had cooked, and now I was dead. Eliana and Atticus called the police, and they found him. The officers documented everything and searched the house again. No one discovered the hidden room in the basement. They ultimately concluded I wasn't home. All the police could do was say, "We'll begin a search for MS Adkins immediately. We'll also pursue legal action against her for unlawful confinement." The reporters dispersed, but online discussion exploded. At first, people sympathized with Brandon. Then, the tone shifted into jokes and mockery. Respect for Vonnie. She actually did what we all think about, but don't dare try. I can't even imagine what Professor Sawson went through that month. Brandon slammed his phone down, his face dark with anger. He gave orders to his assistant, Ethan Hoffman, who had rushed over. His voice carried nothing but resolve and hatred. File for divorce again. This time, even if Yvonne pretends to be dead, no. Even if she really is dead, I'm still divorcing her. Wind swept through New York, and snow began to fall. The first snowfall came earlier than usual this year. Brandon finished speaking through clenched teeth. Then, he staggered and suddenly collapsed. Losing consciousness, I had been dead in the basement for 2 days. He hadn't eaten for 2 days either, to stay alive. The man who used to be picky about everything managed to break free from the ropes and drank tap water straight from the bathroom sink until his stomach was full. My chest tightened. If I'd still been alive, I never would have let him suffer like that. I locked him up because I couldn't bear losing him when he asked for a divorce. I never wanted him to be starving or in pain. I let out a quiet sigh as I watched the police, Eliana, and Atticus rush him to the hospital. Brandon's stomach lining was severely inflamed and bleeding. Even after treatment, he was still extremely weak. Eliana sat by the bed, hands trembling as she held his, sobbing uncontrollably. This is all our fault. Your father and I were overseas for more than a month. Every time we contacted you, you only texted back. We thought you were at the research institute again and couldn't take calls. I should have asked someone there. I should have realized that lunatic had your phone. Her eyes were swollen and red with regret. She gently touched the wounds on the back of his hand, her face full of pain. Those injuries came from the month Brandon spent trying again and again to break free from the restraints. Atticus brought over some oatmeal. He stirred it carefully until it cooled, then helped Brandon sit up and handed it to him. His voice burned with anger. Don't worry. This time, our family won't go easy on her. That lunatic will pay. Wards always felt colder than anywhere else. But Eliana and Atticus stayed by Brandon's side, fussing over him and making sure he was okay. It was the same ward, but his ward somehow felt warmer than the rest. I felt a flicker of jealousy. Back then, I hid my condition and tricked Brandon into dating me, then marrying me. Part of it was because he treated me well, was soft-hearted and easy to sway, but another part was that I wanted the kind of home he had. I didn't have a mother who cooked his favorite ravioli from scratch on holidays or a father who would drive kilometers out of his way in the rain just to bring Brandon an umbrella. Mom died when I was 10. My younger brother, Elliot Adkins, died when I was 14. I killed Dad when I was 15. At 16, someone tried to extort me. I was stabbed in the abdomen. In the emergency room, they removed 1 kidney and half my liver. No one ever asked if I was in pain or if I might die. I didn't have a home. I'd never been loved. So when I was 21, walking home in the rain, and Brandon stopped me to hand me his umbrella, it felt strangely new to me. In this terrible world where everyone hated me, someone actually paused and calmly offered me an umbrella. I thought it was fascinating, and I felt a rush of excitement. I'd known for a long time that something was wrong with me. I wasn't normal. Because of that simple gesture, that one umbrella, I fixated on Brandon like an obsession. I started following him. I hired a private investigator and dug into his family background, work, habits, and personality. Then, I hid my condition and staged chance encounters, getting closer step by step. It took me 2 years to get Brandon. I hid who I really was well. Around him, I was gentle, obedient, soft, and timid. For 2 years, I never slipped. His friend, a psychologist, thought something was off and warned him. There's something strange about her eyes. Bran, you should be careful. Brandon defended me. She's just shy. She doesn't know you well, so she's nervous about making eye contact. The first time he brought me home to meet Eliana and Atticus, I followed quietly behind him. The Sasson family was prominent. But they didn't look down on me. Brandon liked me, so Eliana and Atticus liked me too. While talking with them, I mixed truth with lies and told them parts of my tragic past. Eliana hugged me, tearing up at dinner. I finally tasted the ravioli he had told me about. The ones Eliana made by hand. They were soft, warm, and perfect. I loved Brandon even more, and I wanted a place in this family even more. Pretending to be normal and pretending to be someone else for Brandon could get me all of this, so I worked even harder to play the part of a good girlfriend, right up until we got married, but people couldn't hide who they really were forever, neither could I. Once I had him, I became terrified of losing him when Brandon worked late at the hospital. I'd take a cold, shower on purpose, then call and say I felt feverish. When he had dinner with collaborators, I'd show up pretending it was a coincidence, then drag him home early. At first, his colleagues and collaborators joked about how sweet we were as newlyweds. Gradually, the way they looked at us changed. I couldn't stand not seeing Brandon for long. I kept demanding he come home. His research suffered, and his deals with collaborators fell apart. Atticus grew disappointed. Eliana stopped looking at me with warmth. Brandon kept defending me. Then one night, he finally reached his limit. "Vonnie, are you under too much stress lately? Maybe Alex could talk with you." Alexander Stanton was his psychologist friend. Brandon had noticed something was wrong and wanted him to evaluate me. The private investigator I hired photographed them meeting and recorded their conversation. Alexander told Brandon directly to consider divorcing me. He said my psychological issues didn't look simple. He said I seemed to be suppressing something, but my possessiveness still came through as deeply unhealthy. Brandon stayed silent for a long time. For the first time, he didn't rush to defend me. The smooth, charmed life he'd lived for more than 20 years was slowly unraveling because of me. That night I cried and apologized, promising I'd change. Brandon softened and pulled me into his arms. "That's not what I meant. Vonnie, I'm worried you're hurting inside. If something really is wrong, I'll go through treatment with you." But when Alexander said I had a psychological disorder and urged him to divorce me, he hesitated. He was afraid and was pulling back. After that, I held myself back for a while. I tried not to interfere with his work or social events, but I couldn't suppress it forever. After a period of forcing it all down, I finally snapped, and the obsession came back worse than before. I started following Brandon to the research institute even. During the day, one of his colleagues was startled when he turned the corner and suddenly saw me. Brandon was mortified. For the first time, he looked at me and asked in a low, tight voice, "Yvonne, what exactly are you trying to do?" After that, when I pretended to be sick and called him, he stopped answering. When he was in the middle of critical research, he stayed at the laboratory until past midnight before coming home. He walked in exhausted, only to face my hysterical outbursts. I got upset because he exchanged a few extra words with a junior of his .so. He deliberately went out to dinner with her after work. He was starting to resent me and push me away. He said, "Yvonne, Alex was right. In your eyes, I'm just something to put on a shelf, but I'm not going to live like that. I have my own life. Yvonne, please go see a doctor. I'm tired." We started fighting constantly. Brandon grew visibly thinner and more worn down. I couldn't control myself. I followed him more and more. Eliana and Atticus felt heartbroken watching Brandon. Eliana grabbed Brandon's hand, crying, "Your father and I respect your choices. We won't interfere in your marriage. But Bran, look at yourself in the mirror. You don't look like yourself anymore. When I see Yvonne now, I feel afraid." Brandon stayed silent for a long time. Then, he followed their advice and filed for divorce. That night, we sat across the table from each other. He didn't even dare sit beside me anymore. His voice sounded drained. "Yvonne, I'm sorry. I'm really exhausted. I'll leave you more money. Stop hiding your condition and go get treatment." I knew then that Brandon had truly decided to give up on me, but I didn't want to lose him. No one else in this world had ever loved me. Since I couldn't keep him, I could only trap him. So before the hearing, I cried and begged for forgiveness. I said I'd follow his advice and get psychological treatment. When he softened again, I never planned to let him leave the house. Still, I wasn't entirely lying about treatment. After all, there was something wrong with me. And he didn't like that. I didn't want him to start hating me. One of the medical books Brandon read mentioned electroconvulsive therapy for mental illness. I couldn't go to a hospital. If there were medical records, I might be committed. They'd lock me away, and I'd never see him again. So I researched everything online. I bought parts and assembled a device myself. When everything was ready, I told him excitedly on a bright afternoon, "In a few days, I'll let you go. By then, I'll turn back into my old self." I'd return to that version of myself, who was gentle, obedient, soft-spoken, and timid. I'd have the steady mind of a normal person. I'd become the person Brandon, Eliana, and Atticus liked. I could have a family and be loved. Brandon called me crazy again, but I didn't get angry. I wouldn't be crazy much longer. I lay down on the makeshift treatment bed. Every time I thought about him, the device connected near my heart sent a jolt through my body. But I kept thinking about him. I thought about the first time we met, when he was the first person to hand me an umbrella. I thought about the ravioli Eliana made, steaming hot and impossibly comforting. I thought about Atticus' gentle voice when he told me, "Vonnie, whatever happened before is in the past. From now on, this is your home." And then the fear came rushing back. I became terrified of losing Brandon. I started thinking that if he didn't want me anymore, I would just lock him away, until my awareness began to blur, and I caught the smell of burnt flesh. I lowered my head and saw a large, charred patch over my chest. My psychiatrist had been right all those years. My illness was never going to be cured. Someone as deeply unstable as I belonged in a psychiatric hospital. I felt a flicker of regret as the thought crossed my mind. Then, my body seemed to grow weightless, drifting upward. From above, I saw myself lying on the bed, looking grotesque. Brandon stayed in the hospital for just one day before rushing back to the research institute. He had always been a workaholic. The month I locked him at home had forced him to rest longer than all his vacations over the past 3 years combined. I followed him everywhere. For the first time, I thought being dead wasn't so bad. I didn't have to sneak around anymore. I didn't have to worry about his colleagues calling me a stalker, and I didn't have to hear him call me crazy. The only regret was that my hand passed right through him. I couldn't touch him anymore. I sat beside Brandon, resting my chin on my hand, watching him focus on rows of reagents, colorful bottles everywhere. They were boring, but his hands handling the chemicals were beautiful. The way his eyes lowered in concentration was beautiful, too. It was the first time I could watch him work up close like this, without restraint. His phone lay off to the side. In the past, it would ring every hour or two with my calls. This time, it stayed silent all day. Brandon worked in unusual peace. He focused on his experiments while I watched him. By dusk, the phone finally rang. Brandon set down the reagent, removed his gloves, and answered with a habitual frown, "Yvonne, I'll be late tonight." No response came from the other end. Irritation surfaced on his face. "You've been causing chaos for a month. You know exactly how much work you've cost me. Give me until midnight. I'll be back by midnight at the latest." And about the divorce. A voice finally spoke. "Bran, it's me." It was Eliana. Brandon froze, startled. Then, he looked at the caller ID, disbelief flickering across his face. After 700 days of marriage, this was the first time he had spent an entire day at the research institute without hearing from me. Eliana continued gently, "Ethan said you didn't even eat lunch today. I brought soup. Even if you're working late, come out and eat first," Brandon answered. "Okay." As he walked toward the lab door, a sudden soft noise came from the windowsill. The evening wind had picked up. It knocked over the potted winter jasmine on the windowsill, leaving the pot tilted against the window pane. I had brought that plant when winter started. Whenever I came to see him, but worried he'd get angry, I used the excuse that I was checking on the flowers. Now, the pot had tipped over, swaying in the wind. When Brandon looked over, his expression darkened. He didn't like that plant. Just like after we got married, when my true nature surfaced, and he stopped liking me, he pulled open the laboratory door and headed straight out. He didn't plan to deal with the plant. Then, there was a loud crash. His hand froze on the doorknob. And he turned sharply. The pot on the windowsill was gone. Outside, the tree branches thrashed wildly in the evening wind. Brandon's expression darkened. Almost on instinct, he hurried to the window. He pushed open the small side door and stepped outside. The pot had fallen to the ground, soil scattered around it. As he rushed over, he kicked a loose stone and stumbled for a second. He crouched beside the pot. frowning as he checked it quickly, once he was sure it hadn't cracked and the plant inside wasn't badly damaged. He let out a breath of relief. In the dim light and heavy wind, his hair was blown out of place. He reached out to pick the pot up, then hesitated and pulled his hand back. Still crouching, he stared at it, lost in thought. After a long moment, he took out his phone and snapped a photo of the fallen pot. He opened our chat and sent it to me. His fingers hovered over the screen before he typed another message. "Come take it away. This isn't a good place to keep a plant." Over the past 6 months, Brandon and I fought constantly. I clung to him and refused to let go. He was worn down, body and mind. Our chat history consisted almost entirely of voice calls I had bombarded him with. Most of them went unanswered. The rest he picked up, spoke a few hurried, impatient words, then hung up. This was the first time in half a year that he had sent me a message on his own. I was almost delirious with joy. I reached for my phone to reply no. It was better to call him directly. Text felt cold. It didn't carry the warmth of his voice. In fact, the way he spoke to me had already turned cold for a long time now, but I couldn't find my phone. Then I remembered, dead people don't use phones. The message he sent would sink into silence. Unanswered, Brandon stared at his screen for a while. Something like confusion flickered in his eyes, but he put the phone away. He picked up the pot and quietly brushed the soil back into place when he was about to set it back on the windowsill. He paused, then placed it on the ground in the corner instead. It was sheltered from the wind there. The pot wouldn't be knocked over again. Maybe he didn't hate the plant as much as he claimed. As he left the lab and reached the turn in the hallway, a window hadn't been fully shut. The wind pushed the curtain outward, making it billow. Back when I used to follow him here, I had once hidden behind that same curtain when he suddenly turned around. Ethan had pulled it open to check the weather and nearly jumped out of his skin when he saw me. Brandon looked at the swelling curtain. Then he suddenly strode forward and yanked it open. My chest tightened, as if I were really hiding behind it. But when the curtain fell back, there was only the half-open window and the cold wind pouring in. A researcher passing behind him asked, surprised, "Professor Dawson, is everything okay?" For a split second, Brandon looked awkward. He reached to close the window. "It's nothing. The wind's strong. I'm just closing it." The person left. Brandon shut the window and glanced down at his own hand, distracted. It was as if he didn't quite understand why he had pulled the curtain aside. Eliana brought over a thermos of chicken soup. She also brought along his junior colleague, Elizabeth Robertson. Eliana had lost weight, her face lined with exhaustion. Yet she forced a smile. Lizzie just finished her master's. Her field matches perfectly, so she'll get some experience here. You two grew up together. You should mentor her yourself. Elizabeth smiled politely and stood to pour him a drink. "I'll be counting on you, Professor Dawson." The atmosphere looked normal, but something about it felt off. Eliana clearly wanted to set them up. Brandon quietly picked up his glass. "I'll pour it myself." Elizabeth froze, embarrassed. He then glanced at Eliana, who was already frowning. "I'm busy. Through the end of the year, let Ethan supervise her instead." Eliana's voice hardened. "Mr. Robertson specifically asked for you. You're more experienced. He'll feel better if you guide her." Brandon answered as if he didn't catch the hint. "I'll talk to Professor Carrillo. He's a full professor and much more senior than I am. He actually has an open spot for another student right now." Elizabeth's composure cracked, her face flushed, and she excused herself to leave. Eliana's expression fell. "Bran, what are you thinking? If you don't like Lizzie, I can find someone else for you." Brandon gently set down his spoon. His lowered gaze rested on the steaming, fragrant chicken soup. After a long pause, he answered calmly, "Mom, I'm not divorced yet." Eliana shot to her feet. She was a respected academic, rarely this shaken. Even her voice trembled. "When the police find Yvonne, you can divorce her immediately. She illegally confined you for a month. If your father and I hadn't come back and called the police, you would have died in that room. Even if she doesn't go to prison, isn't that enough for a divorce?" Her emotions surged, her eyes reddened. "Your father and I never interfered with your life. You've always been sensible. You know right from wrong. Yvonne's background wasn't great, and her job was ordinary, but we didn't say anything after the marriage. She controlled you excessively. Even then, we respected your decision, but now she's hurt you. She nearly killed you. I'm your mother. How could I just stand by and watch you suffer? How could your father? I lowered my eyes, ashamed, gripping the hem of my clothes. Honestly, even if I were a normal person, I still would have been far out of Brandon's league, and that was before I even factored in how serious my condition was. Eliana and Atticus only accepted me because their son loved me. They treated me well because of him. I'd always known that. Everything I received, and everything that felt like a normal life, existed only because of Brandon. Brandon's hand at his side trembled silently. Still, he spoke in my defense. She was sick. She never meant to hurt me. The last few days, she might have had an episode and left somewhere. Maybe she forgot I was locked inside. Eliana's clenched fists shook violently. She pressed them hard against the table. Trying to control herself, her eyes were red as she stared at him. You almost died. You almost died. Do you understand? Does it even matter whether Yvonne meant it? Alex said her condition is severe. She's losing control. She might lock you up in one of her episodes today. Tomorrow she could be lying beside you, then stab you in the middle of the night. Brandon, she's lost her mind. Have you lost yours too? Why are you still defending her? Before Eliana finished, she broke into violent coughing. Her breathing grew labored, and her face began turning bluish. Brandon hurried to his feet, flustered, trying to steady her. I'll divorce her, at least until she gets treatment. Eliana grabbed his hand tightly, eyes wide. No, this time, I'll be the villain. If you still want me as your mother, you must divorce her and never see her again. Alex already said it. Her condition can't be cured. There's no recovery. Brandon didn't respond for a long time. The anger in Eliana's eyes slowly shifted to fear. This time, we can't compromise, Bran. You've always been steady and level-headed. Your father and I have always respected your decisions, but not this time. I know you only filed for divorce to pressure her and make her admit she needed treatment, but she's getting worse. Her condition can't be fixed. Bran, you're our only child. Eliana's voice began to shake uncontrollably. Then, she covered her face and broke down, sobbing. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. She said that when Brandon brought up divorce, even going so far as to file in court. It was only to push me into getting treatment, but I could feel it. He hated me and was afraid of me. I was crazy. No one would ever like me again. Not even Brandon, who had always been the easiest to soften, the easiest to fool. Still, I was already dead. What he truly felt didn't matter anymore. Before leaving, Eliana said through tears, "Your life should have gone back on track a long time ago. Bran, you've always been smart. You know what to choose." Brandon remained seated by the window, staring blankly at the chicken soup that had gone cold. Looking at it, he seemed to remember something. During the month he was locked at home, he often refused to eat, his mind on the verge of collapse. I bought food he liked and cooked for him myself, but he wouldn't touch any of it. One night, worried he'd damage his stomach, I begged him to eat. He lashed out and said he wanted chicken soup from a restaurant in Atlanta, so I drove all night, more than 10 hours, just to get it. On the way back, I hit a tree. My arm hurt badly. I didn't stop to check, I just kept driving home. When I finally brought the now cold soup into the bedroom, Brandon looked at my right arm and called me insane. I lowered my eyes and realized my elbow was dislocated. Half my arm hung uselessly at my side. Brandon's gaze was mocking, but I thought he cared, so I explained. I was driving all night and got sleepy. I hit my arm. He sneered. "Too bad it didn't kill you." I smiled along with him. Guess I've always been hard to kill. That was what my parents used to say. They called me worthless and said I'd survive anything. Elliot said the same. When Dad pinned me to the bed, Mom quietly closed the door. In public, he was gentle and respectable. In private, he was a monster. If he took it out on me, Mom wouldn't be the one getting hurt. She was afraid of suffering, so she pushed me out instead. They all thought I'd die eventually. But Mom and Elliot died before I did. Then I killed Dad. I went on living. I inherited his house and his money. I grew up being called a burden. Later, I was labeled a murderer. After all these years, I was used to the cold looks and the loneliness. And then Brandon handed me an umbrella in the rain. I really wanted to make him happy. I wanted him to like me again. After all, he was the first person who treated me kindly and loved me, so I wanted to be good to him. I wanted to love him. I didn't know how to love someone. But I thought if I gave him what he wanted, bought him what he liked, maybe he'd be happy. The chicken soup I brought back that night had long gone cold. I reheated it carefully, but Brandon still refused to take a single sip. Even now, I still felt a quiet regret. Brandon finally stood and returned to the laboratory. He kept working and didn't take a moment to rest. Then, his phone rang. It was the police. "Mr. Dawson, we've found some information regarding Yvonne. If you're available, we'd like to meet with you. If not, tomorrow is fine." Brandon was halfway through preparing a reagent. Outside, night had fallen, and snow began drifting again. After a brief pause, he set the reagent down. "I'm free now, I'll come over." The police couldn't find me, but they uncovered my past. When Brandon arrived at the station, the officers hesitated, then handed him a thick stack of documents. "Normally, this is Ms. Adkins' private information, but based on what we found, her condition may be more serious than expected. We still can't locate her after all this time, which is unusual. We're concerned she could harm herself or someone else, so we need your cooperation. We have to find her as soon as possible." My psychiatrist had said something similar before. He told me that if I didn't check myself into a psychiatric hospital, I might end up hurting someone. He said it as if I were some kind of monster. Brandon took the file. The first page made him frown. "Homicide." The officer looked surprised. "You're her husband, you didn't know. When Ms. Adkins was 15, she killed her biological father." Brandon looked up sharply, disbelief written all over his face. "She told me her parents were from a rural background and that they favored her younger brother." The officer flipped the page. "She wasn't honest with you. Her father was a clothing businessman in Atlanta 10 years ago. He did some charity work and had a bit of public recognition. His name was..." The officer tapped the file. "Richard Adkins." Brandon stared at the name. After a long moment, something seemed to click. "Richard Adkins. That case in Atlanta 10 years ago that shocked the whole country." His voice grew hoarse. I didn't know where to put my hands. That familiar, unbearable pressure started building in my mind again. My head throbbed, and everything blurred. The officer nodded. "Yes, Ms. Adkins was the 15-year-old who killed her father in that case. She was diagnosed with a psychiatric disorder, was a minor, and she had been repeatedly abused by her father. The case drew intense public attention. She was ultimately found not guilty and committed to a psychiatric facility." My mind felt like it exploded all over again. Scenes that replayed in my nightmares surfaced, now spoken aloud by strangers, instinctively. I wanted to run, but I knew there was nowhere to go. There was no place in this world that would take me in. The only house I had was now sealed off by police tape after they rescued Brandon, so I moved closer to Brandon instead, as if he might still hand me an umbrella or offer me shelter when the storm came again. His fingers resting on the file slowly curled, stiff and rigid. He opened his mouth, as if to speak, but no words came. His face turned pale, and cold sweat formed at his temples. The officer continued. "She stayed in a psychiatric hospital for 3 years. At 18, she was evaluated and discharged. She returned to high school, but classmates called her a killer. There were conflicts. She dropped out, worked several jobs, and ran into people who recognized her. She kept getting fired and eventually took odd jobs online. Based on what we're seeing, we suspect her condition was never fully resolved." I lowered my eyes and looked at my toes. In the end, it was all discovered. Everything about me came to light. Brandon would hate me even more now. He'd push me away completely. My condition couldn't be cured. I just didn't want to spend my life locked in a psychiatric hospital like an exhibit. That's why I manipulated the evaluation before discharge and managed to slip through. For years after leaving, I forced myself to stay under control. I never hurt anyone. Locking Brandon up for that month was the first time I lost control, but I never meant to hurt him. Brandon braced himself against the table and stood, unsteady. His voice sounded hollow. "It's late, I should go." The officer spoke carefully, almost apologetically. "This may be difficult, but our investigation shows MS. Adkins hasn't been close to anyone for years. You're the only person she trusted. We're hoping you can try contacting her. Maybe she'll come forward." Brandon pulled open the station door. Night wind rushed in, lifting the hem of his coat. He stood there, hand on the handle, for a long time. Then, he turned back and said, "She didn't hurt anyone." The officer looked surprised. His gaze drifted to the fading bruises on Brandon's neck. Brandon lifted a hand as if to adjust his collar. Then, he let it fall. Snow drifted in through the half-open door. His lips were pale. His voice was calm and clear as he said, "That doesn't count. She and I are legally married." I nearly forgot how to breathe. After I revealed my true nature during our 2 years of marriage, he had grown to resent me more and more. Even hearing the word legally married from others made him uncomfortable. But now he had said it himself. Hope flooded me, maybe. He didn't hate me as much anymore. If I begged him again, maybe he wouldn't divorce me. If electroshock didn't fix me, I could try something else. He liked normal people. I could try to become normal. Maybe it was still possible. Just imagining it filled me with nervous excitement. Then I lowered my eyes and saw my half-transparent body. Only then did I remember. I had almost forgotten that I was already dead. Brandon didn't return to the research institute. For the first time, he left unfinished work behind. He got into his car and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. He stared out the window at the heavy snowfall. His hands tightened slowly around the steering wheel. The veins on the back of his hands stood out, as if he were making a painful decision. After a long time, he took out his phone. He opened our chat and sent a message. "Come back. Yvonne, I forgive you. If I were still alive, I would have been overjoyed. I always said Brandon was the softest person in the world." I rubbed my fingers together, feeling a trace of regret, and then, unexpectedly, a little sadness too. His phone rang not long after he sent the message. Brandon exhaled sharply, as if something gripping his throat had suddenly released. But when he answered, it was Alexander. "Bran, I couldn't sleep after thinking it over. There's something I should probably tell you. Last weekend, Yvonne suddenly called me. She asked me about electroconvulsive therapy for mental illness." By the time Brandon sped to my house, it was already past midnight. Police tapes surrounded the property. After suspecting my condition had never improved, officers worried I might return and harm someone nearby. They weren't searching for a person. They were searching for something dangerous. Brandon stepped out of the car, slipped on the snow, and nearly fell. He never used to look this disoriented in the past. The wind and snow grew heavier. His face turned even paler. He crossed the "Do Not Enter" tape. Moving quickly, unlike himself, he entered the code and went inside. The police had already searched every floor multiple times. The house felt cold and empty, nothing obviously out of place. Brandon took out his phone again. The chat still showed the messages he'd sent me. His calls went unanswered. He stood in the vast living room, confusion slowly filling his eyes. Then, he suddenly turned and rushed to the shoe cabinet. He pulled it open. The shoes I usually wore outside were inside. But my house slippers weren't there. All these years, I'd kept my standards for living very low. I barely bought clothes or shoes. As long as I had enough to wear, that was fine. Brandon's breathing suddenly turned uneven. He yanked open the drawer above the shoe cabinet and saw my car keys. Then, he glanced over and noticed the coat I had taken off when I came home, still hanging by the entryway. My laptop sat on the coffee table in the living room. Brandon rushed over, clipped the corner of the couch, and stumbled. He fell hard, then practically crawled to the table with shaking hands. He punched in the password and unlocked the laptop. the messaging app that logged and automatically popped up with unread notifications. His conversation was pinned at the top. The messages he'd sent over the past few days were all unread. There were also messages from a client who had commissioned work from me online. They first urged me to hurry, then complained that I had missed the deadline. The earliest of those messages had come the evening I died. That night was the first time I hadn't brought Brandon dinner. Brandon stared at the screen. The hand pressed against the keyboard began to tremble. Maybe in that moment, he remembered what I'd said to him that afternoon. In a few days, I'll let you go. By then, I'll turn back into my old self. Before that, I had called Alexander to ask about electroconvulsive therapy, but he had always disliked me. He wasn't about to tell me much. He only warned me that it had to be done by licensed doctors in a proper hospital, and told me not to do anything reckless, so I searched online myself then. I bought some equipment through unofficial channels. I figured I'd treat myself like a test subject. Everyone always said I was hard to kill. I'd heard that my whole life. Unfortunately, it still failed. The living room was deathly quiet. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, branches occasionally snapped under the weight of wind and snow. Brandon suddenly shot to his feet, his face twisting, and staggered toward the stairs. Yvonne, come out. You didn't leave, did you? Stop messing with me. Come out. I told you, I don't like crazy people. He had already searched upstairs and downstairs countless times, but now he shoved open every door again like a man possessed. His voice grew hoarse, nearly hysterical. Come out. Yvonne, come out. He clutched his phone and kept dialing my number. The call connected, the ringing went on, but no one answered. Brandon searched upstairs and downstairs again, then stumbled toward the basement. Maybe by then, he had begun to sense something. He stopped abruptly near a wall. From behind it, faintly, came the sound of a phone ringing. The sound was muffled, barely audible, but he heard it. The color drained from his face. He rushed to the wall, feeling along it, pounding on it. The ringing inside continued. A month earlier, when my condition had worsened, I had told him, there's actually a better place in the basement. Even if the police came, they probably wouldn't find it, but it's cold and damp. You wouldn't like it. Back then, he thought I was just rambling. Now, his fist slammed into the wall. His eyes, always calm or cold before, turned bloodshot. Blood split his knuckles and dripped to the floor. Then, he noticed a clock hanging on the wall. He ripped it down. Behind it was a keypad lock. The glass shattered, fragments scattering. Across the floor, cold sweat rolled down Brandon's forehead. His hands trembled violently. He kept entering passwords, over and over. Each attempt met with another, incorrect password, until he entered the date we first met. A soft chime sounded, and the lock clicked open. In my 25 years of life, many of the dates that mattered most were tied only to revenge, like the day Mom and Elliot died, and the day I killed Dad with my own hands. Only the day I first met Brandon mattered for reasons that had nothing to do with revenge. His hands were shaking too badly. He tried once, then tried again. The hidden door in the wall should have opened easily, but it only gave way after he pushed at it again and again. The moment it opened, a burned, bloody, rotting stench poured out in a silent rush. His gaze, uncontrollable, took in everything inside. A hollow face seemed to be completely frozen in an instant. Lying on the bed, my face had long since faded to a deathly pale. Bloodstains seeped from my chest through my clothes as it oxidized and darkened. It congealed on the medical device. My left hand reached toward the edge of the bed. I tried to touch the phone charging on the bedside cabinet, but I could no longer reach it. At that moment, I simply felt terrible. Whether I lived or died did not matter to me, but I wanted to make a call to the police so someone could find Brandon. I had not brought him dinner yet, and he was still hungry. Brandon stood by the door, rooted in place, unmoving. The phone at the bedside kept ringing until it automatically disconnected after timing out all around. Only a deathly silence remained. Outside the window, the endless wind and snow continued for a long, long time. He tugged at the corner of his mouth and said softly and heavily, "Maniac." It was as if, During all those times when we kept having unpleasant arguments, he had cursed me countless times in the same way. But at this moment, the anger and hatred in his voice had vanished. His tone was hollow, like a bottomless black hole. He finally lifted his foot and walked toward the bed. He kicked the chair and his body collapsed to the floor. He climbed up and, expressionless, continued walking forward. He was so calm, as if the person lying on the bed was not dead, but merely sleeping. Only his eyes, silently, were as crimson as blood. His body leaned against the edge of the bed. He reached out, but did not touch me. Instead, he first touched the roughly made, coarse medical device. His fingertips rubbed over those twisted, tangled wires for a long time. Then he whispered, "Did you make this yourself?" As if I could really answer him. I lowered my eyes, thinking with some discomfort that this was something I could not help. Such things, bought for personal use, were not compliant, nor could they be purchased. Aside from buying some parts and assembling them myself, I had no other option. Brandon's eyes grew increasingly red. He suddenly let out a laugh. The man who used to be so handsome, for the first time, laughed in such an ugly way. Who taught you that electroshock therapy targets the heart? He reached out, as if he could barely see clearly. After several attempts, he finally touched a strand of hair stuck to my face, stained with blood. His fingertip gently brushed it behind my ear. His voice grew so faint that I could barely hear him. "You still claim your fate is tough. Look at you. Look at you, you failed." So, he still remembered that sentence. I had thought, from a long time ago, it was always me, clinging desperately, chattering endlessly to him. He had never really listened to what I said. The phone still clutched in his hand suddenly rang. Brandon, dazed, pressed to answer. On the other end, Eliana's voice came through, filled with worry and urgency. "Ethan said you left halfway through mixing the reagent. Bran, where did you go?" Brandon looked in a daze at me on the bed. I went. Before he finished speaking, he suddenly collapsed onto the floor, retching violently. It seemed the voice on the other end of the phone abruptly pulled him back to reality, making him recognize everything before him. I was dead. Not long ago, I was still the wife he resented, the one who made him and his mother argue about whether to divorce. It seemed, all of a sudden, I had died. Sweat rolled in large drops down Brandon's forehead. He hunched over in distress, retching, but could only spit out a little sour water. He had not eaten all day. He had not taken a single sip of the chicken soup Eliana brought. The harsh sound of vomiting carried to the other end of the phone. He seemed unable to catch his breath, his face turning from deathly pale to bluish purple. Eliana's voice became frightened and panicked. "Bran, what happened? Where are you?" Brandon desperately opened his mouth wide. It was as if someone was choking him tightly by the throat. He tried with all his might to breathe, but he could not draw in any air. His empty, helpless gaze was fixed on me lying on the bed. He reached out, attempting to touch me once more. Then, with another loud bang, he suddenly collapsed to the floor and fainted. I rushed over in a panic, but there was nothing more I could do. Brandon fell gravely ill and lay in the hospital for more than 10 days. During those 10 days, the Sawson family bought me a fine burial plot and laid me to rest. Eliana held my urn in her arms, murmuring softly, "Child, oh foolish child." Atticus turned his back, secretly wiping away tears. They were all soft-hearted. Just like Brandon, when Brandon was discharged from the hospital again, spring had already arrived in New York. He returned to the research institute and became even busier. It seemed as if nothing had changed. Only when I followed him did I see him preparing another batch of reagent. Occasionally, when an assistant or other staff member entered, he would put the reagent bottle away. Later, that newly prepared reagent was turned into finished pills. My soul grew weaker and weaker. One evening, I rested my head beside Brandon and dozed off. Half awake, I opened my eyes and seemed to see him take one of those pills. I suddenly became fully alert. When I looked again, his hand had already put down the glass of water. I did not know what effect those pills had, but I instinctively felt worried. Then I thought, even after death, I was still troubled. Before I died, He already disliked me so much. How could he possibly take something harmful to himself just because I died? I thought it over and felt relieved. Then I gazed out the window, lost in thought. I wondered how many days my soul had left before it would dissipate. When I looked back again, I saw that, unusually, Brandon was not continuing his work after taking the pill. His gaze became serious and meticulous as he searched around the laboratory, as if looking for something. The way he searched for things was rather strange. It was more like he was searching for something floating in the air. He searched for a long time, until disappointment finally appeared in his eyes. I felt that he had truly been acting strange these days. That night, Brandon did not work overtime and, for once, left the research institute on time. On his drive home, he passed by a street food stall. I had dragged him here to eat before. His stomach was delicate, and that night he ended up in the hospital with gastritis because of it. But this time, he stopped the car and walked over. Inside the food stall, a few interns from the research institute happened to be eating. When they saw Brandon, they immediately stood up to greet him. One intern gathered his courage and called out, "Professor Sawson, would you like to join us for some food?" Someone next to him quickly tugged at his sleeve and whispered, "How could the professor possibly eat this kind of food?" The intern gave an awkward laugh and said nothing more. Brandon walked a bit farther away and sat down in a spot with fewer people. He had always been someone who disliked coming to places like this, but now he ordered grilled skewers and fried rice, and even asked for a case of beer. The last time I came here with him, our relationship was already very strained. I told him the fried rice here was especially delicious. He took a bite and insisted, "It tastes terrible," but while I ate on my own, he did not leave first. That night, I ate too much and drank as well. In a daze, I vaguely heard him say, "Yvonne, if you really don't want a divorce, then go get treatment." At this moment, I suddenly remembered the things Eliana had said. She said that Brandon brought up divorce with me only to scare me, to make me admit my illness and seek treatment. My mind wandered aimlessly until, all of a sudden, I felt a very strange gaze. It was as if someone was staring straight at me. Since my death, this was the first time I felt someone looking at me. I looked up and suddenly met Brandon's gaze, on the table covered with a plastic tablecloth. Many beer bottles were already toppled over in a messy heap. Suddenly, my body could not move. He could not possibly see me. Maybe he just happened to look this way by chance, but I could clearly feel that his gaze was fixed directly on me. I could not figure out what was happening, and even suspected I was hallucinating. Instinctively, I still felt uneasy and guilty. Somewhat flustered, I turned my head to avoid his gaze. In my ear, I heard Brandon, his voice thick with drunkenness, let out a soft laugh. "Yvonne, even a lunatic knows how to panic." I suddenly turned my head, looking at him in utter shock. You can see me?" Brandon stared at me coldly. In the dim, yellow light of the night, a mist seemed to gather in his eyes. "Why wouldn't I be able to see you? You turned my life upside down, and before the divorce was even finalized, you tried to escape responsibility by ending your own life. Yvonne, why shouldn't I be able to see you?" I looked at him in disbelief, then suddenly realized something. "That medicine of yours, is it hallucinogenic?" Brandon replied to me in a cold voice. "More or less, I didn't expect it, but I really can see you. But the effect isn't quite enough yet. I need to borrow a bit more alcohol. I'll improve the medicine another day." I started to get a little anxious. That kind of medicine is bad for your health, and so is drinking. Even if you were angry about not having divorced me yet, it really wasn't worth it to hurt yourself like this. Brandon's gaze toward me grew even colder. Does a lunatic even care about their health? When you invented your own electroshock therapy device and hooked it up to your heart, did you care about your health then? He still spoke in that harsh way. I sighed in frustration and said, "It was my first time trying it, so making some mistakes was inevitable. But Brandon, I'm already dead. Isn't that retribution enough? Can't you just," I paused, "say something nice to me for once?" Brandon lowered his head to eat his fried rice and ignored me. Out of habit, I still moved closer and apologized to him in a placating tone. "I was just afraid you'd really go through with the divorce. Besides, you were working yourself to death back then. If you didn't rest, I was afraid you'd suddenly collapse and die. It was only in those last few days, after I died, that I stopped bringing you meals. I really didn't mean to make you suffer. I reached out to grab his hand again, but my fingertips passed right through his. I forced a smile and joked with him. But look, isn't this just like performing magic? He still ignored me. Now that I was dead, I couldn't force him to pay attention to me anymore. I sighed and lowered my head in disappointment. After a while, I suddenly heard his voice by my ear. Then I forgive you. Let's go home, overwhelmed with joy. I looked at him abruptly, only to meet his bloodshot eyes. But I still felt a little sad. I followed Brandon into the car. When he tried to open the passenger door for me, I had already floated through the window and settled into the seat. I looked awkwardly at the open car door. I quickly floated out, then floated back in properly and thanked him. Brandon's eyes grew even redder in the silent night. When we arrived home and drove into the yard, the car swerved unsteadily and almost hit a tree. Brandon stopped the car. He looked at that tree and suddenly asked me, "That night you went to Atlanta to buy chicken soup, did you really hit the tree because you were sleepy, or was it because you were afraid?" I felt a bit embarrassed, but after a long pause, I still told the truth, yes. I was afraid. It all started when I left the psychiatric hospital in Atlanta at the age of 18. I sold the apartment my father had left behind in Atlanta and bought a smaller one in New York. After that, I never returned to Atlanta. I once told Brandon that I hated that place. Later, when I locked him at home, he vented his anger by deliberately making me go to Atlanta to buy chicken soup. After so many years, when I returned to that old place, I was so scared that I accidentally ran into a tree. Brandon glanced at me for a long time. The branches swayed in the wind, and shifting light and shadow danced inside the car. Suddenly, he reached out, ruffled my hair, and said, "Fool, we existed in two different worlds." Yet in that instant, I seemed to truly feel his touch. I was genuinely overjoyed, anxious, and cautious as I asked him, "Are you not hating me as much anymore?" As the words fell, even as someone who was dead, I seemed to hear my own thunderous heartbeat, but I thought, Brandon probably would not answer such a silly question. I looked into his eyes. Then, feeling uneasy and discouraged, I wanted to avert my gaze. After a long moment, I heard his very soft voice. "I never hated you, Yvonne. I love you." I suddenly widened my eyes and looked at him, so ecstatic that my heart almost leapt out of my chest. If, that is, a heart could still beat after death. I heard Brandon's voice continue in a daze. "I clearly resented you, hated you. You turned my life upside down, but I still love you." I could no longer hear what he said after that. Overjoyed, I lunged toward him really. I reached out, wanting to hug him, to grab his clothes, but after fumbling for a long time, I still could not touch him at all. Brandon sat in the dim car, leaning against the seat, his gaze burning as he looked at me. Then, slowly, he raised his hand and unbuttoned his shirt one button at a time. I stared fixedly at his waist and abdomen, my mind about to explode. "Brandon, are you seducing a ghost? Are you even human?" Brandon's crimson eyes grew increasingly misty. He spoke again, word by word. "You brought this on yourself." I was so angry that I cursed. "You're insane." He let out a low, helpless laugh. "Maybe I am, Yvonne. Is your madness contagious?" His gaze drifted emptily toward the heavy night outside the car window. I used to think my life was on a perfect track. Academics, work, marriage, everything would be like that. But you pulled me off that track, dragged me into a madman's world. Brandon would never eat street food, never call anyone crazy. Brandon would make everyone keep their distance, never be entangled by anyone. He would never be foolish enough to drive all night just to buy chicken soup. His gaze silently, slowly, returned to my face, but Yvonne's husband can, in the past, it was always me saying these sentimental things. But today, it was finally his turn. What a rare and precious thing that was. I clicked my tongue in amazement, yet for some reason, my eyes grew inexplicably hot. I was dead. It was as if Brandon had replaced me and become that strange person. He forced me to follow him closely, never leaving his side, in the laboratory, in the conference hall, and even when visiting Atticus and Eliana at home. He would always look at me frequently. It seemed that if he blinked, I would disappear. Occasionally, when no one else was around, he would talk to me, and in order to see me, he had to keep taking hallucinogenic drugs with severe side effects. The first time he suddenly fainted was in the laboratory. His hand knocked over a glass of concentrated sulfuric acid, nearly splashing his face and causing disfigurement. After that, it happened again in less than half a month. While speaking on stage in front of everyone in the conference hall, he suddenly collapsed. The media compiled his speech and found that he had answered off-topic several times. Public opinion began to ferment. People said that Brandon, who had become famous at a young age, appeared emotionally absent in front of the cameras, suspected of having mental problems. Then, the media finally captured a video of him talking to the air. A single video completely ignited all the previous speculations. News of Professor Sawson's mental breakdown quickly shot to the top of trending searches. The genius who once lived above the clouds gradually became a laughingstock. Atticus and Eliana grew older and older, begging Brandon to see a doctor. I felt as if I had returned to the time when, because of my mental illness, I had turned Brandon's life upside down. I knew clearly that it was time for me to leave, even if I did not care about public opinion. If the side effects of that drug continued, it would probably cost him his life. No matter what, I did not want to meet Brandon again in the underworld. I thought that after death, my illness had gotten a little better. Now, compared to possessing Brandon, I began to hope more that he could live well, so perhaps I was also starting to become a normal person who was not disliked by others. At night, I lay in bed with Brandon. He could not touch me, yet he still habitually reached his hand into the air, as if holding me. I thought it over again and again. Finally, in the moonlight streaming through the window, I spoke to him softly. I might be leaving soon. My soul cannot hold on much longer. Brandon suddenly opened his eyes wide. The bedroom lights were off. In the dimness, for the first time, he looked at me with such panic and urgency and said, "Then I'll go with you." The end.